next agenda item is public input. If there is any member of the public present at the meeting tonight who wishes to speak on a matter that's not already on the board's agenda, now would be the time to raise your hand and make your presence known.
This is the point of order question, Dave. Do we need to re-roll call now that we rejoined?
I don't know, but let's do that just to be on this, just to make sure that we don't accidentally miss out on something. So let's see, Mr. Wood.
Present.
Mr. Venkatraman.
Present.
Mr. Hassinger.
I'm here.
And Ms. Hassinger.
Here.
Mr. Robbins is present and Ms. McCormick. I see Ms. McCormick on the screen, but.
Oh yeah, I'm here.
Okay, just as a formality, dotting the T's and crossing the I's or whatever we do with it, we're all here and ready to proceed. And,
Dave, are you going to tell about the 244 Worcester Street? So, because there may be some people here who are interested in that.
I'll suggest taking it out of order for that one.
Yes.
Seeing as how it's well past the 7:30 public hearing time. All right, as I said, seeing no public input, we'll skip directly to at least I think we may be able to take up a couple of public hearings pretty quickly and come back to the rest of the agenda. So taking the public hearing slightly out of order, the request for special permit at 244 Worcester Street, the applicant has requested a continuation to the last meeting of February, which is
The 28th.
the 28th.
I move that we grant the applicant's written request to continue the hearing until February 28th at 7:30 p.m.
Second.
Moving and
Okay,
second.
Discussion.
Bob.
Definitely. Chris, did you get my message, and do you have, can you straighten it out?
Yes, so I did. Your question was in regards to the decision deadline for the tolling of the 40R timelines, the required
43.
timeline. Sorry, 43D to submit a decision. So that's the select board is technically under that. They're the guideline for that, and they issue that. The board is the various boards, not just planning board, have rendered their decision. What I'll do is I will work with the applicant prior to the 28th to get a formal letter. As you noted, we can still continue that deadline by mutual agreement of the applicant and the select board. So I will, prior to the 28th, get that before.
We can also waive, we could agree to waive 43D. I quoted in my message, I said, whatever it is, extend or waive.
The priority deadline, right?
Yeah, I think that the thing is that I'm reluctant to extend this to February 28th because the decision has to be, I don't know, probably recorded on March 28th, which is, we have two meetings, one week after the February 28th meeting, and then we have one on March 28th. So if things don't work out, we're in a lot of trouble there, because I don't see how we can do a decision on the 28th under any circumstances and have it be counted. Maybe the clerk can come in and record it or something, but that's why I sent you the message. I was hoping you'd get something from them.
So it's the decision deadline is for the select board, and I will have them reach out to the select board and record a mutual agreement prior to the 28th, extending that deadline.
All right, that they're really interested in the 43D part of this.
Yes.
They're the
it's
ones that have
expedited
extended this
permitting, and
by
that-
3 months.
So that's the expedited permitting, the 43D is the
Yes.
expedited permitting, and in terms of that, they certainly, the board has, it's not just the planning board that has open hearings. Not all of the boards have finalized their process, so in terms of getting the approvals in time, I think it's in both the applicant's interest per their request, and the select board certainly is no issue in tolling that deadline.
But my point was tolling versus waiving. If they're not too worried about the benefits of 43D, then they might be willing to waive, and that would save us from having to go around this more times.
The benefits do extend past just our decision timeline, right?
Correct. Yeah, no, it's March is the
March 28th is the decision deadline.
correct.
And I don't know, but I think that means an executed decision probably recorded. And we're meeting on the 28th. We're not gonna, even if we close the hearing on February 28th, we're not gonna have a decision on the 7th. I think it's the 7th. So the only time that we could have a decision would be the 28th. And that's the day I'm talking about being decision day. So I think that there's an exposure there. And I had hoped also that their current request for a continuation would have the same tolling language we always have, and I didn't find it in this one.
So what I'll do is, I can't speak for the applicant to say that whether they want to toll or waive the requirement, but I'll work with them to see what a mutual date is, and get the necessary paperwork for that to clarify it on the record. In terms of the, decision deadline, we also have the March 14th meeting prior to that 28th. So we have the two meetings prior to the March 28th deadline.
March. Oh, okay. I didn't see that. Okay,
But
that's okay. Okay, well, there's room to do something about it. Okay, so anyway, it was moved and seconded. Enough discussion.
Any other further discussion? Hearing none. We'll call for the roll call vote. Mr. Venkatraman,
Aye.
Mr. Wood,
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger,
Aye.
Ms. Hassinger,
Aye.
and Mr. Robbins votes aye. Motion carried. Applicant's continuation request has been granted. The next public hearing, I'd like to move on to the continuation of Tufts. Item A under our public hearings. That should be relatively brief. We left it open for the purpose of receiving the peer review, and the peer review has come in. And at least my read of the peer review appeared to indicate that the peer review raised no new issues that would require further work.
Yeah, I agree with that assessment from my read of it. Nothing that affects our decision making on the master plan in my mind. The peer review did call out a sign that I kind of agree with them that probably should have sight lines improved from, but beyond that, nothing that really affects their master plan decision.
Any other commentary or thoughts on that? Jean or Chris?
We will certainly work with the Grafton DPW and relocate that sign. If it, because it does indeed appear to block the sight lines for oncoming traffic. So we've talked about that internally, and we're certainly willing and happy to do that.
Yes, I'm not aware of any reason why that particular issue needs to be reflected in any way with the campus master plan. So if there's nothing else that needs to be done regarding the campus master plan, then it might be appropriate for there to be a motion to close the hearing and direct staff to draft a decision.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion of that motion? Hearing none. Mr. Venkatraman,
Aye.
Mr. Wood,
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger,
Aye.
Ms. Hassinger,
Aye.
Mr. Robbins votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. And Chris will get to work on the paperwork.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You all.
And we have a public hearing, a continuation of the preliminary plan approval for the subdivision identified as 124 North Street rear and several other roads. So what's the latest status on that?
Good evening. It's Vito Colonna with Cornerstone. We were here to, to discuss it. I know it's been a while since we were here before you. We've done a little work in the meantime. Basically, a lot of it was coordinating with the abutter in those discussions. But we're ready to present the updated plans, and hopefully everything addresses those outstanding comments. If you're ready to start, I can share my screen and kind of show you where we've gone and what we've done. That sounds good. Okay. All right. So, so also we have Scott Goddard, the applicant, and George Connors from our office is also on the call right now too. George is listed under my name. If you get confused, there's two of me on there. One of them is actually George. So actually there was 3 items basically from the last meeting. One was the Graves engineering review, which I believe we've gotten the updated letter, and it seems to have addressed all their comments. They were relatively minor in nature, and they weren't really the main discussion points at the last meeting. At the last meeting, we really discussed about the future roadway extension and how the lots would be reconfigured in the future if that were extended. And the other item was really about the driveway and potential relocation and any issues that may arise related to the abutter up in here. So just a quick recap, because I know it's been a long time. Let's see if I can if I can get the overall view of this. So the overall parcel, it was a larger piece, North Street over on the left-hand side of the page. Magnolia running down here. It's a 70-acre parcel, 73 acres about. And we're really focused in this one corner over in here for a 4-lot preliminary subdivision. So if we just scroll down to this is a blown up section of that 4-lot area, lot 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we've reconfigured some of the lots. This is basically discussing that roadway potential extension. The old lot lines are shown in yellow, and the new lot lines are kind of here and in here. And we've actually taken that roadway extension and kind of hooked it over a little bit. I know there was discussion last time about the potential crossing of a wetland down in here. And just to kind of avoid that, we've left it open where we could either come up and hook through, or you could even still kind of go through this area at the base of the slope. So it's one or the other. This alignment really works for both. But the primary route would be up here, and we would just kind of do some earthwork to pull that face back to allow the road through. And as part of that, there was questions on how lots would get reconfigured in the future. So we just did a little bit of an exhibit here. This would be it right now if you had the cul-de-sac. And when you went to the future extension over here on the right-hand side, it would just be a matter of giving these parcels to these abutting lots. There wouldn't have to be any land transfers between the lots themselves. So you wouldn't need any agreements, with separate landowners. It would basically just be take this yellow piece, give it to 2, the blue piece goes to 4, and the green goes to this piece. And then when the road comes through, everyone has their required frontage. Lot 3 still has its area. So it's a pretty simple configuration. I know there's a lot last meeting, there was discussions about, you know, all kinds of crazy ones that had, you know, dog legs and all kinds of, you know, remnant pieces and stuff like that. This one was pretty clean because it's a straight shot in, but we did want to show how that would look in the future with the two situations. So this being the currently proposed, and then this would be in the future situation if that road were ever extended through.
I
And
may
then
on
the-
that
Oh,
thing.
sorry.
I'm sorry. Just a quick question on how the road extends.
Yep.
For lot 3, it maintains the area. I see a difference of what is it, about 600 square feet, 700 square feet.
Yeah, so we still have, yeah, this one had 60,000 on the left-hand side. Whoops, sorry. In the current
Yeah.
condition, and then we'd go down to about 40,000, just over it to meet the requisite area.
Oh, I first thought that said 60,000 on the right. Okay, I'm good
Oh,
now.
yeah.
And what becomes of the little triangle on the other side of the extended?
This right
road?
here. This would most likely get given to this backland in here. So you'd still have your area here, and then that would all just be clean transfers over.
But someone already bought lot 3.
Yep.
But and so they own. We have an easement so we can build our road, but I'm not sure they own a piece of land on the other side of the road.
It could all be written into any type of agreements
Okay.
that, you know, when that comes through, this goes to the backland.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, all right. And then the last item was more related to the driveway up in here with the, you know, right now the existing one goes right up through over this kind of corner of the right-of-way parcel. And it was within 50 feet of the roadway entrance. So there was discussion on potential options, how that may get resolved. George is actually on the line, and he's had some discussion with the abutting landowner's attorney, I believe. So he might be able to shed some light and kind of go through that a little bit. George, are you there?
Sure. Yes, I have had a letter to Attorney Helwig, who is representing that landowner relative to use of the road in the old documents that created subdivision and the road. And he has returned my call, and we have discussed how that will proceed. They have questions that we will be answering when they proffer them. We had a very good discussion, and it appears that this thing can go forward at their satisfaction. We see no problem with that whatsoever.
Okay.
Back to the extension. Have we analyzed and confirmed that the roadway, when it's extended, complies with our rules for radiuses and distances between all of that, the curves?
Yeah, it has a reverse curve that runs through here, but it complied with that, the regulation. I think it was what, one of them has to be double the minimum requirement. So we looked at that as far as that reverse curve that goes through there.
Any other comments, questions from the board? Any comments or questions from the public? I see one hand raised on Zoom. Chris, could you, oh, there we go.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Kristen Marati. I am, my wife Sherry Osit and I are the abutters in 27 Magnolia Lane. And I'm just listening to this presentation, and you know, we have had our attorney has reached out to Scott's attorney for preliminary discussions, but we have not come to any conclusions, nor have we had any, you know, options that are to our liking on the placement of the driveway. So we've been, you know, waiting for communications, and we've gotten some communications. Most of the communications that we've received have been very close to the days of these meetings. And we have not had adequate time to come up with a adequate solution that we can currently that's acceptable to us. We have not had many proposals, so you know, I don't see how this can go forward until we iron out what is going to happen with the driveway. And right now, I mean, we have reached out to Scott's attorney, Mr. Goddard's attorney, and our attorney is in contact. But the last communication that we have had is that right now we need to get together and figure out what we're going to do, what we're going to come up with. And to this point, that has not happened. So I'm very concerned that, you know, if there's a vote taking on this proposal tonight, that the issues that need resolution have not been resolved.
May I respond?
Yes, please.
I did have a conversation with Attorney Helwig sometime last week, and the conclusion of that conversation was that he would send us a list of what they would want. There were two alternative diagrams, just concepts of how different driveway would go in. So we are waiting for that party to advance it.
Well, I am that party, and my wife is that party. We have, you know, we have not had these initial two drawings that are on the plans were something that was discussed months ago, that we said, you know, what are you proposing? And my wife said, I'm not very visual. By you talking about it, can you draw something up? And then all of a sudden, these two options became the choose option A or choose option B. And we have not come to a conclusion on either. I mean, there may be an option C out there that is more acceptable to us. But as of right now, you know, the initial conversation that was had with our attorney was, we are open to suggestions, and we will be, you know, we will be in contact. However, the communications, you know, this has been continued multiple times over the last few months, over the holidays, all at the last minute. And, you know, I just don't, we have not had the conversation that is needed with all parties. So what you guys are saying now is that the initial conversation has happened. The initial reaching out and saying, yes, we're willing to meet and willing to come up with a solution has happened, but we have not come up with a solution. I want to make that clear. Right now, we have not come up with a solution. And until a solution has been made, I don't see how we can move forward, or how the board can move forward on voting on this preliminary hearing.
Yeah, let me just make one observation here. Is this is a preliminary plan, and as such, it often happens with a preliminary plan that a number of details remain to be ironed out. Now, I would, yeah, ideally, ideally we would like to see this worked out and an agreement. But
well, I would think this is not a minor issue. This is a major issue. I mean, you cannot have a road turning into a driveway and a road parallel to each other, almost on top of each other. And until that's worked out, I mean, there's really nothing that we can do. And I'm not saying that we're not open to working it out. I just want to have the meetings and have us discuss what our options are and what our concessions are and their concessions will be before we move forward.
Yep. What I'm hearing is that the matter is being discussed, but it has not been resolved.
That is correct.
And I was about to say, ideally, it'd be nice to see this fully resolved before the preliminary plan gets approved. But in practice, a preliminary plan the approval of a preliminary plan only allows the developer to go forward with a definitive plan. And it is at the definitive plan stage where this absolutely has to be nailed down.
No, actually, I don't think it has to be approved. The preliminary doesn't have to be approved to allow them to go forward.
This is true. The board could not approve a preliminary plan, and the applicant could still move forward with a definitive plan. So the definitive plan is where the rubber meets the road. And as you pointed out, Mr. Inamorati, this absolutely has to be resolved before a definitive plan can be approved by this board.
I suggest that we disapprove. If there's nothing else, we can close the hearing and we can prepare a decision that denies or does not approve this plan because of the ambiguities here. And everyone will be able to move forward.
Any other questions or comments from the board or the public? As far as I can tell from the discussion, the only issue outstanding at this point is the question of the driveway. And there's probably nothing to be gained by continuing the preliminary plan public hearing while the applicant and the abutter work out the details.
So I move we close the hearing, and direct staff to prepare a draft decision reflecting disapproval because of whatever about this issue.
Discussions.
Yeah. Anybody else want to second the motion?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion of the motion?
Offer for discussion that I'm
Justin?
less worried about.
Can't hear you.
Oops, what's going on here?
I don't know what's going on.
Justin's fumbling around with his mic.
Yeah, he's muted.
Can you hear me now?
Ah,
Yes.
Okay. So all I was going to say is I'm less inclined to deny the preliminary plan, but I would definitely consider that a showstopper for a definitive. But I'm not worried. I'm not that worried about the motion as it stands.
you're okay with it?
Yes.
I move the question.
Any other discussion of the motion? Hearing none, we'll put this one to a vote. Mr. Venkataraman,
Aye.
Mr. Wood,
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger,
Aye.
Ms. Hassinger,
Aye.
and Mr. Robbins votes aye. Motion carried. Staff will draft a decision reflecting the discussion, and the applicant will continue to work with the abutter, and eventually they will work something out somehow, some way, some form, and we'll see that all come back in the definitive plan.
Thank
All
you.
right, well, thank you. Have a nice night.
You too, and thank you. All righty then. Done with our public hearings for the evening. Now we can go back to the rest of the agenda. The first discussion item being a proposed conceptual site plan modification at Alfonso Village, 100 Westboro Road. So who's going to start out showing us what's going on here?
I can do that, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everybody. My name is Mark Mastriani. I'm here with Essek Petrie and Matt Leidner. Myself and Essek are representatives of Pulte Homes of New England, and Matt Leidner is our civil engineer on the project with Civil Design Group. Just wanted to thank you all for giving us time tonight for this discussion on your agenda. So Pulte Homes of New England, we're a national home builder, but our office is very local. Our local office is right here on Flanders Road in Westboro, not too far down the street from Grafton. And we've been building communities in this area for over 30 years. And we know Grafton very well. And we're excited to have the opportunity to work in Grafton. Again, it's been since the early 2000s, mid 2000s, when the last community we built there. So tonight we're excited to announce that we're partnering with Dominic Afonso and his team to build out the residential component of the mixed-use development, Alfonso Village. I'm sure you all know, but Alfonso Village is located at 100 Westboro Road. So it's located off of Westboro Road and Institute Road. The approved special permit was issued in September of 2020, so a little over a year ago. And the approved plans, the endorsed plans were endorsed in December of 2020. So, just about a year ago, a little over a year ago. So, our agreement with Mr. Alfonso is predicated on certain modifications to the approved plans and permit. We're to better align them with, our proposed development program that we've been building successfully, in this market currently and previously. We have a lot of, we being Pulte Homes New England, have a lot of experience building these garden style buildings, units in this area. And we think Alfonso Village is a great location for our next community. We're really excited to be here and to work with you all in the town, to bring this Alfonso Village project to fruition. So we're here tonight to discuss our modifications, the proposed modifications, and hopefully get feedback and comments from the board before we proceed with modifying the plans and preparing any formal submissions. And then also to hopefully obtain some guidance from the board on the process and the best way to proceed in order to to apply for any amendment or to the special permit or to the approved plans. So with that, Matt Leidner is here, and he's prepared a short presentation to present the changes to the board. And I'd like to turn it over to him if that's okay with you, Mr. Chairman, and your board members.
Be our guest.
Thank you so much. Matt?
Great. Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chair, board members, members of the public. Matt Leidner with Civil Design Group, civil engineer for Pulte Homes. And I'll try to go through this and be fairly concise and just run through everything. Feel free to stop me along the way with any questions. But I thought the best way to go about this sort of introduction to the proposed modifications was just a very quick recap of what was previously approved by the planning board. So this is the site here, again, 100 Westboro Road. So it fronts on Westboro Road up here on top of the page, Institute Road over here on the right side, which north is up on this plan. So Institute Road on the east side of the project. The site is approximately 16 acres. And what was approved here was a mixed use development consisting of 5 3-story buildings. So 1, 2, up close to Westboro Road, and then 3, 4, 5 closer to Institute Road. The two buildings closest to Westboro Road, the first floor consisted of commercial space, 18,000 square feet, 9,000 in each building on the first floor. And then floors 2 and 3 of these buildings are residential apartment units. The 3 buildings back here closer to Institute Road, all 3 floors of those buildings are residential. And so in addition to the residential units in these 3-story buildings, also what was approved were 4 townhome units over here by Institute Road. So the total of what was approved was, again, 18,000 square feet of commercial space in the first floor of these 2 buildings, and then 105 units, which consisted of 101 units within these 3-story buildings, rental units, apartments, plus the 4 townhome units, which I believe were going to be ownership, for sale units. So again, 105 total units. So our goals in modifying this plan to adapt it to Pulte's program were to maintain the fundamentals of what was approved, either maintain them exactly as approved, or if not, keep them very similar to what was approved. So that was our primary goal here, was to make this plan, keep it as close to what was approved as possible. Both in terms of the uses, the commercial and the residential, the square footages, number of units, but also in talking with Afonso about the process of approving this plan, it came to our understanding that certain elements of the site plan were very important to the planning board, such as pedestrian connectivity through the site, and also having a pocket park. There was a large pocket park approved within this development here. So it was very important to us to maintain those features as well, seeing that they were important amenities to what was approved. And so what we did is we took this approved plan, and I have here an overlay comparison plan showing in black what was approved by the planning board. The red here is also what was approved by the planning board, but what we are proposing to modify. And the green is the proposed modification. So to walk you through that, the 2 buildings up closest to Westboro Road, footprint-wise, would remain the same as what was approved. And the square footage of commercial space in those buildings would remain the same, 18,000 square feet or 9,000 apiece. However, the proposal here would be to make these buildings 1-story buildings and solely commercial, and take the residential units that were on floors 2 and 3 of these buildings and shift those to the buildings here in the back of the site, closer to Institute Road, and take the 3 buildings, what was approved as 3 exclusively residential buildings in the back here, and consolidate those into 2 buildings. So the 3 buildings here were 3 stories. We're proposing to consolidate into 2 4-story buildings, which is allowable under zoning. That meets the height requirement under zoning. And then to provide a portion of the parking, which in the approved plan was all surface parking, provide a portion of that parking now underneath the footprints of these buildings, these proposed 4-story buildings. The townhomes, again, 4 townhomes were approved, the red units here. We are proposing 4 townhomes as well in this scenario, shifting them over here to the left side and breaking them up into two duplex buildings. So 2 buildings of 2 townhomes each instead of 1 building with 4 townhomes. The total number of residential units in this modified scenario would be 104 units, which is 1 less than what was approved. 105 units were approved. And that's merely that's merely based on the footprints, the architectural footprints of these buildings. The floor plans just didn't lend itself to that additional unit. So 104 was where this architecture landed in terms of best matching what was approved by the planning board. Very important to note that in this modified scenario, all of the units, all 104 units would be home ownership units. There would be no rental units proposed here, whereas the approved plan had 101 rental units and 4 ownership units. So these all 104 would be ownership units under this scenario. So just kind of to recap what I just went through, the 2 front buildings would remain where approved. However, the second and third story residential units that were approved in those buildings would be shifted to the back and consolidated with the 3 buildings in the back into 2 buildings that are exclusively residential units. And then these 2 in the front would exclusively be the commercial space. And we would keep 4 townhomes, but split those into 2 buildings as opposed to 1 fourplex. Other comparisons between the 2 plans. So in terms of parking, we would be proposing 35 additional parking spaces, which we feel is necessary to meet what we anticipate to be the parking demand for the site. But of note is that even though we would have more parking spaces, we would have far fewer surface parking spaces. So we would be reducing surface parking by about 65 parking spaces by providing that parking within the footprints of these 2 residential buildings. As you would expect, because we are proposing to add a story from what was approved and go to 4-story buildings, that consolidates the footprint of the buildings, and then providing the parking or a portion of the parking under the buildings consolidates impervious areas. So the net result of all this is a reduction of impervious area from what was approved by about, I think, about a ½ an acre reduction of impervious area. So the stormwater system of what was approved, which was a stormwater basin over here on the west side, would not need to be changed. So if anything, it might be slightly oversized because we are reducing impervious area under this proposal. So there'd be no change necessary for the stormwater management system. Water, the method of supplying water and discharging sewer would be the same. So both municipal in this case. That was what was approved. That would be the same under this scenario. Same in terms of pedestrian connectivity. All the main connection points we maintained with our walkways, sidewalks. And then we did move the pocket park. So this red line here, this was the approved pocket park here. And just based on how we've reconfigured the buildings in this proposed scenario, we shifted the pocket park to down in this area. And we ensured that the area within this pocket park is slightly larger than what was approved. So our goal was to keep it consistent or if anything, slightly larger than what was approved. In terms of amenities within that pocket park, we would be proposing this very similar or the same types of amenities. I believe there's some picnic tables and benches, that sort of thing. And that type of detail would come along with an official submission for the modification. But the intent is to keep it the same as what was approved by the board. So I'll just switch here. This is a rendered version of the proposed modified scenario, showing the 2 residential buildings here, and then the townhomes here, and the commercial buildings up front near Westboro Road. So from a zoning standpoint, just to go through this real quickly, since the lot itself isn't changing, there's no changes to minimum lot size, frontage, lot depth, all that stays the same. As far as the front yard setback, so the buildings up here closest to Westboro Road, there's no change proposed with those. So the front yard would be exactly consistent with what was approved. With the residential buildings here, the front yard setback, which is for multifamily, is a minimum 10 feet, maximum 30 feet. So if I zoom into this part of the site here, what we didn't want to do is have this building and the mass of it too close to Institute Road. We just did not feel that that would be appropriate for this design. And so what we did is we set the building back to it's not way back, but it's farther back than the 30 feet from Institute Road. And we've incorporated an architectural element structure, a covered trellis structure extending toward Institute Road to within the required setback. And our plan there would be to incorporate an outdoor amenity space, a seating area, walkway into that feature. So provided to meet the front yard setback, but also provide an amenity associated with that feature. And with this scenario, of course, we don't have any parking in the front yard, so no parking between the building and the road here. The side yard, we meet the required 15 feet right here, this corner of the building to this side lot line. This, just based on the configuration of this lot, it's sort of a corner lot, but not really, because we don't have the true corner here as part of the site. But there's no rear yard lot line on this site, so it's just the front and the sides, and we propose to meet the zoning for those setbacks. I did speak about building height. So again, 4 stories, 50 feet is the maximum allowable building height in this zone. And we are proposing to be 4 stories and at or just under the 50-foot height requirement. There's a zoning requirement that street facing walls be no less than 60 feet, no more than 100 feet in length. So our wall here facing Institute Road, we're right in that range at 92 feet. There's a maximum footprint requirement of, let's see, 20,000 square feet for commercial buildings. These buildings are each 9,000. And again, they were approved that way. That's well within that requirement. There's no maximum building footprint size for multifamily buildings, but just as a point of reference, these buildings are approximately 19,000 square feet in footprint. There is a requirement in zoning that there be a street facing entrance. So we did make sure to incorporate, while the primary entrance will be internal to the site, not face the street. Here, we did make sure to incorporate a secondary street facing entrance facing Institute Road to meet that requirement. There's a minimum facade height of 18 feet for commercial buildings. So now that the proposal for these 2 commercial buildings would be single-story buildings, we would be proposing to meet that minimum height requirement for the facade of 18 feet. And as you'd expect, based on the fact that we're reducing the impervious footprint of the project, there is a slight increase in the outdoor amenity space, which is also a requirement under zoning. So the project met it before, and it would actually, the numbers would work a little bit better under this proposal because of the decrease in impervious area. And that's part of the reason why we were able to enlarge the pocket park somewhat on this plan. So I guess just in closing here, and I'm sorry if I dragged on a little bit long here, but in closing, Pulte's excited to take on this residential component of the project. And as Mark had mentioned, there are certain adjustments that they would need to see happen to the site plan in order for it to fit into their development program. But we're hoping as we go through this process that these changes are well received and actually looked at as if anything furthering, improving upon what was approved in terms of the site plan. And so I'm happy to answer any questions, and the team here is happy to answer any questions. But before I turn it back over, one of the other aspects to being here tonight, other than introducing the project to the planning board and hopefully getting some initial feedback, We'd also like to try to take away from this meeting what the process would be to put these changes officially forward, how we would go about submitting these back to the planning board officially for review and approval. So I appreciate your time and again, happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Just to briefly address the process question, I think this looks to me like a proposed modification to the special permit. And that typically is submitted to the board through the planning office, obviously. Often a modification can be considered by the board to be minor. So there's no really just the board looks at the proposed modification, the plans, and can agree that it's a minor modification. The scope of this particular modification looks to me like the board might deem it a major modification subject to the public hearing process. Your best bet going forward is probably to work with Chris, through the planning office to set up some idea of what materials should be submitted with the modification request. And Chris's advice may be to prepare an appropriate set of documents and submit it to the board as a modification. The board can presumably the board would probably schedule a public hearing and kind of just go through this public hearing process similar to what we did when we reviewed the project initially. But unless anybody else on the board has any comments on that process question, I'd say going forward, you work with Chris to work the details of that. Chris, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, Dave.
Bob.
Usually when we talk about modifications, there'll be a step where people come in and ask, can it be a minor modification that doesn't have to go through all that? But if the decision is it needs to be a full application with a hearing, then there's an extra step introduced by doing it that way. And I'd suggest, I think this would be better just to go to a hearing, not consider it a minor.
Yep, so I met with the applicant and their team for a development team meeting. We had a discussion very similarly where we did kind of discuss the scope, and I always leave strategy up to the applicants and how they want to proceed. And my recommendation, is that there's the two options depending upon their timeline and their needs. They can go ahead with the minor modification request, understanding that if the board finds the scope is larger, which it sounds like, we don't have to have a straw poll, but it sounds like the board feels that the scope may be a little bit larger here. They may be required to submit a full application anyways, depending upon if they want to take that step and see if that's amenable to the board, they can do that. Otherwise, they can just submit the full application and the board could proceed under those guidelines. But understanding that there are additional materials typically required for that. So
the height in the current approval and compare that with the height here, I think it was 50 feet for the tall buildings in the new proposal.
Correct.
And what height do we have in what's currently approved?
So those buildings, they were 3 stories and they were 40 feet or under. I believe they were close to the 40 feet. I don't have the exact number in front of me.
The point is, we were talking about the fire department a while ago. They, among others, are worried about tall buildings and whether their trucks can do the job, whether they have the ladders and whether they can get to the places that they want to do it. So I think that comes in with it, formal hearing.
And probably to proceed with the least amount of delay, it probably would be, I mean, how do I want to say this? Proceed with the least amount of delay. It's probably good to assume that this deserves a public hearing and go from there. I think you can, as I said, I think you can, the applicant can, work with the office to determine whether they want to take the initial step of requesting that it be reviewed as a minor modification, or just go ahead and in any case, if it goes forward to the hearing, then work with the office to identify all the materials that need to be submitted. And with that, unless somebody else has any thoughts on the process, we're more interested probably in everybody's thoughts about the proposed design here. So I'll ask the board, are there any questions or comments about the design?
I have one. Justin will put his hand up first.
Probably fine.
I go ahead? Okay. Couple of questions. So one was when I know Pulte, I live in a house built by Pulte. So is Pulte taking over this from Afonso? And are you coming in as a contractor, a general contractor? Are you becoming the promoter? How should I understand this?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we are taking over the residential component of the project. So Dominic would still be doing the commercial retail component of the project up front along Westboro Road. And then Pulte would be taking over the residential and doing that ourselves. So we would not be a contractor. We would be an owner, builder, developer, and then we would sell the units to future homeowners.
Okay, and Dave or Chris, you might be able to help out. Does that mean that needs to be routed through an approval process if this the initially approved project was being split up into two different sub projects?
Yeah, so if the presumably we would move through the modification of the and render a decision for a modification of the decision, and what that'll reflect is the change. We can work with them to see on the deed who's the property owner. If that changes, that'll be reflected in the application. They'll both be applicants under this modification request.
And my last one is just a nightmarish situation. In my past, I used to manage a homeowners association, and we had something all together. We had residential and commercial units together, and it was a nightmare for managing the homeowners association. I'm sensing this is going to be two different. At least the residential piece is going to be having a separate HOA, and the commercial is going to be managed something differently.
That is correct. Yeah, the intent is that the 104 residential units would be created under a condominium format, Chapter 183A, and they would form their own condominium homeowners association and have their own rules and regulations.
Thank you.
Are they the ones who then would be responsible for the pocket park and all the grounds?
Absolutely. They would be responsible. So there will be, as part of creating the condominium and the 104 units, there will be common land associated with that residential component of the project. And that can be spelled out in the modification. And so the condominium association would be responsible for that common area, and that would include the pocket park, the parking areas for the residential units, and the other common features of in the residential area.
And then how does the front area work?
the front area would be maintained and owned by the commercial developer. So right now, it's Mr. Alfonso. He intends to build out the commercial retail. He would be the owner. I can't speak for him, but he may lease out build and lease out the buildings to tenants, or however he handles the commercial retail component. But the parking area around the commercial and those grounds would be owned and maintained by the owner of that use.
Okay, Justin, you had your hand up a little while ago.
Yes. So my first question is, this is 4 stories of units, is that correct? Of residential units in the buildings?
4
Correct,
stories
so-
of residential units, correct?
Yeah, 4 stories of residential units with parking below.
And the first story of the units would be roughly at grade, like give or take, maybe?
Correct. The parking is basically subsurface.
Okay.
The end of the building where the parking, you enter the parking, obviously that's exposed there, but it's at base, the parking's at basement level.
Okay. And is it known at this point how parking would be attributed to the owners of the units? Would that be like numbered parking that the owners would have assigned parking essentially in the garage, or is it unknown?
Yeah. Yes, no, that's great. So we have a lot of experience building similar types of buildings like this. And what we found works operationally is that the parking in the building, in the garage, the covered parking, is deeded to units. So it's a numbered and it's assigned exclusively to a unit. And then the surface parking is supplemental to those spaces and is provided, and it's open. So it's not reserved, it's not deeded to any unit. It's open and it's available at first come, first serve to owners and guests. And the amount of parking that we would provide, we found it is the perfect balance of providing enough parking for our future homeowners and for the needs without providing too much that you're providing too many in impervious area and things like that. So we have a lot of experience, and we provide the right amount that works.
Yeah, and my last question with parking is kind of a subjective question, but it's the idea that I drive a Toyota Sienna, which is a minivan and pretty big, but not overly big. But parking garage I visit in Boston is extremely tight and problematic to find a spot that I can fit in, and with the right clearances and everything. Is this expected to have a closer to it outdoor parking that you would typically find, at least in this town, as far as sizing concerns and clearance heights, or is this
Yeah. So Matt, let me ask you, because that's a great question. So is the outdoor spaces we're proposing, are they 9x18, or does Grafton have a different dimension that's different?
No, you're correct. They're 9x18.
So all of the parking spaces in the garage are designed 9x18, which is the same size as typically in most communities, although some communities have different sizes, but 9x18 is definitely a full-size standard space that's industry standard, I would say.
Makes sense. That's what I would assume. I just figured I'd ask for clarity.
How about the aisle? The width of the aisle.
It's 24 feet wide, so it's the same width of a 2-lane drive.
There's some standards, I think, aren't there?
Yeah, it's 24 feet is the standard for the town for a 2-way drive aisle with 90-degree parking. So both the surface and the garage parking meets that, correct?
Any other questions, comments? Anything more, Bob? You have anything, Linda?
No.
I'll just make a couple of remarks. One, I notice on the picture that we see on the screen, there is a driveway connecting this residential development to the cul-de-sac at the end of the Afonso subdivision. I forget what off the top of my head, forget what the name is, but
The Village at Institute Road.
there you go. But yes, that's something that I think I remember when we were reviewing Afonso Village, the question of an automobile connection between the two developments came up, but it wasn't viewed as something that was essential, nor was it viewed, as I recall, as anything detrimental. It just, it was, the topic came up, but it wasn't proposed. And now I see what driveway is proposed here. I would not expect that to carry a lot of traffic. The subdivision, for the most part, the residents are more likely to go out to Institute Road. But this does provide a connection from that subdivision in, not so much for the benefit of the residential component of this development, but there is a potentially useful connection from the subdivision up to the commercial part here.
Yeah, so may I make a comment about that,
Yes.
Chairman? So Matt, can you zoom back out before we zoom in? So just for the board's information, and so it's not a surprise, and we're sharing all of the information. So we are also excited to tell you all that we are under agreement and are really excited about getting started very soon on the 46 lot single family definitive subdivision that's just to the south of this community, and that you can start to see some of the lots that you met a few years ago. We're not here, we didn't come here before you tonight to talk about that because we didn't want to confuse the two, but we're currently working on our construction plans for that community, because there's a set of definitive endorsed plans, and at some point we'll be coming back to this board and sharing our construction plans with you, just to make sure we're completely coordinated with the construction of the community. So I guess with that said so since we are planning on doing both residential communities, we would prefer, and we're showing our proposed connection between the two residential communities, because that would be our preference. So getting feedback on that from the board is certainly that would be very helpful. But that is the intention, is to provide that connection. Now, the detail that I wanted to bring up and get further feedback is, you can see where Matt's cursor is. There's a proposed emergency access gate there in between the commercial retail center component and the residential component. So our vision was that would be an emergency access gate, and there would be no day-to-day throughway or traffic, between those components. So basically the residential community would all drive out through Institute Road, and the retail commercial component, they would enter and exit through Westboro Road and not cut through the residential neighborhoods. So I'd love to share that detail with you and see if there's any feelings or thoughts on on that detail.
So I guess I'll start. I'll say I personally would not block moving forward with that in place, but I'm not in favor of it. And I'll tell you my two reasons why. Number one is that I think as a cut through, it would be unlikely to be used by anyone outside of this development and the neighboring development that you're looking at, because of Institute Road just being a cleaner shot, so to speak, to Westboro Road, and the only way into these is through Institute Road. The other reason is that if there's any residents in the development that wants to partake in the commercial business in the front there, they would have to go up to Institute Road, take a left on Westboro Road, which is a generally busy street, and then cut back over another left turn to get into the commercial aspect. So I think, at least to me, on a personal level, the downside outweighs the benefit, but I wouldn't personally block the moving forward with that in place.
Yeah, I would, for the most part, I would expect the residents in these buildings here, if they are going to patronize any of the commercial establishments, they would most likely do so on foot.
But there isn't really, so far, there isn't a defined on foot path. The gate there is the way you go.
There is, so there's a sidewalk that
Oh, okay.
goes throughout, but I will say, I mean, I'm saying that there is a sidewalk, it's throughout the whole mixed use development, and then there's a sidewalk that carries through the residential, the single family community as well. But if you live in one of the single family homes that's down at the end of Brook Lane or Dillon Circle, I mean, I'm picking up on Justin's comment, which is a good one, frankly, that it's a long way to walk, and they're it's most likely they'll in the way people live.
Yeah. When businesses get into those buildings as well, I could easily foresee some residents of these multifamily buildings just wanting to get in their car, pull out, quickly stop at a business, grab a eat or whatever they have there, and then head out onto Westboro Road to go on their way to work, rather than walking over and taking the extra time in their day. And they may just skip the business altogether.
I think I'd more expect that there not be a gate there. I'm not sure that it's pretty much what Justin said. But I like keeping traffic off of Institute Road where we can. And he described the traffic pattern around the corner and so on. Left turns on Old Westboro Road or Westboro Road are not fun.
Yes, I'd have to, I tend to agree that on balance, it's probably better to allow traffic to flow through there. I mean, for the most part, people are going to take the route that makes the most sense, and the people, there may not be a large volume of traffic driving up through where that gate would be, but for the convenience of people who do need to pass that way, it's probably would be helpful not to have the gate there.
It sounds, if I could put word, I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but it sounds like having the connection from the single family development into the commercial component through this access way, if the gate was not there, and staying off of Institute Road and being able to, if they chose, to drive up into and out to Westboro Road, that could be seen favorable to the board, or you would not be opposed to it, if that's our preference.
Yeah, and and of course that's a detail that we could revisit once we get into a more formal review process for this. But you're looking for the board's feedback now, and I think you have it on that. Anything else on that, particularly the traffic of that road connection? There's one other observation I'll make, or a question, I think, and I'm pretty sure I know the answer, that as this was originally approved, 25% of the units were to be affordable. I assume that you're maintaining that. Kind of.
Yeah, so we're maintaining. Yeah, so we're maintaining compliance with zoning. So under the zoning, if it's a rental development, it's the requirement is 25% affordable. However, if it's a home ownership community, then it's 20% affordable. And so we're proposing 20% of the condominium units would be affordable through the DHCD program, which our company is very familiar with, that we do all the time.
Yeah, you do that all the time.
How about the 4 single units, or the 2 pairs over on the left there?
The duplexes.
Duplexes.
Yeah, as far as what?
Affordability.
Yeah, I mean, our proposal, so we have not identified the affordable homes locations. we could certainly do that on the modification submittal. But my first, our first proposal would be that the affordable units are not located in one of those 3-bedroom townhomes, and that the affordable homes would be evenly distributed throughout the 100 garden units in the 2 bigger buildings. I think the requirement, it's 20%. So we that would be what we thought, what we think and would prefer to be most appropriate. We've had other communities where we have garden units in a few singles or townhouses like this, and DHCD has approved having all of the affordable units in the garden buildings.
But those 4 units do count towards the number that you're going to take 20% of.
They do, absolutely. So there's 104 units at 20%. I believe it's 21 affordable homes would be required to be provided. 21 of the 104.
Right. And a difference, I think, between this and the prior proposal, I don't recall off the top of my head, the prior proposal for those 4 townhome units, I don't remember off the top of my head whether those were to be ownership or rental. But if they were to have been ownership, then probably one of them would have had to be affordable. But now that you've got 100% of these units as ownership units, it's 20% of the total that has to be affordable. And I will point out that under this proposal, with all of those units being ownership units, the town does lose some unit count towards its SHI, where with the units proposed as rental units, first of all, 25% of them were to be affordable, but because 25% of the rentals were to be affordable, 100% of them counted towards the SHI. So now what this does towards the town's SHI is it only gives us 21 units instead of 100 odd. That's just, the impact on the town's SHI, but that obviously has to be balanced by, what can actually be built here under, whatever the, construction costs and all the other considerations are involved.
I can double check, but I believe the regulations between condo and rental mirrors the DHCD regulations. So I believe at the 20% at condo, all of the units would still count to the SHI, but I'd have to double check to make sure, but that was my understanding.
Yeah, well, it would be interesting just to clarify the impact on the SHI, because it was, the only thing I remember is the difference between ownership and rental. I don't remember ever running across how condos are treated under that. But that's kind of that's really nothing more than an observation at this point. Any other thoughts from the board on, any other suggestions the board would like to make regarding this plan? Any other thoughts? If not, we will count on the applicant here moving forward with the process. As I said before, work with the office and work out what will be submitted when and how you'd like to proceed.
Yeah, well, I will say that based on the feedback I've heard, I don't think we would just come back to the board with a request for a minor modification. I think I'll talk with my teammates here. I see Essex nodding. It was clear to me that the board, and I can't disagree that this, the changes here might warrant a public hearing and a major modification, just to make sure we're all doing the right thing and following the process properly. So I would imagine that we would move forward with a public hearing and a modification submission. And what I would say is that what we needed tonight, or what Pulte needs to kind of feel comfortable with, is that we're in our due diligence period with Dominic Alfonso and his team. And so we wouldn't move forward with the major modification until we really decide that we're moving forward with the project. And we wanted to come to the board tonight to present our changes and just really see if there was anything we were missing, if there was a major outcry. You know, obviously we weren't asking for your review and approval tonight, but I'm getting the sense that as long as we follow the zoning and you know, we'll get a lot of, you know, I'm sure, I'm guessing that Graves will peer review the project. And we'll need to talk with the fire department and the other departments of the town. And we received some initial feedback from this board, but I'm getting the sense is that these are modifications that the board would consider, and we could move forward, you know, working on the details during the process. Is that a fair kind of reading of what I'm hearing tonight?
I think so. And anybody on the board disagree with that? I see everybody's head nodding. Yes, that
Yeah.
sounds about right. So yeah, I think
That's great.
At least on my own part, I'm pleased to see that this is, you know, moving forward to the prospect of something actually being built. It's always helpful to have someone take this over who is in the business and knows how to get these things done.
Yeah, that's great.
It looks pretty good on paper at this point.
Yeah.
I don't have any complaints.
Yeah. And I always try to encourage developers to come in and talk with us like this before getting into the formal process. Sometimes they do, and I think for the most part it works out.
That's great.
I'm glad that you're doing this.
Would it be okay if we were able to through Chris maybe have the ability to talk to Graves Engineering and just maybe get their initial feedback too and some suggestions, you know, as we proceed with, you know, with the submission and updated plans? Would it be okay if we were to talk with Jeff Walsh? And I know he's been around a long time. We actually worked with him on our other Grafton developments, you know, 2 decades ago. Would it be, is that something that we could have the green light to do?
So my recommendation, I know Graves has been willing to do some kind of initial comments and not charge fees. Just in terms of, I think I would probably recommend something along those lines, as long as Graves is okay with taking a look at things and not charging fees. But I don't think that, you know, certainly the board probably wouldn't want to be assessed any charges in terms of review. So you'd have to work out that scope with Graves of what they can do in that regard.
Yeah, I for one at least wouldn't object if Graves is willing to sort of informally discuss this and take a preliminary look at things. All right, anything else on this? If not, thank you very much for coming in and sharing your proposal with us. I think it, as we said, this looks good so far, and we'll look forward to seeing this come back at some point when you're in a position to do so.
Yeah, that's great. I appreciate all of your time, and I know you had a busy agenda. And we are very excited to move forward with this project and also the other one. So I look forward to working with you all as we work out the details here.
Well, great. And thank you again for taking the time to work with us tonight. And we'll look forward to the next step in this.
Thank you.
All righty then.
Have a good night.
You too. We have 1 or 2 other items on our agenda. We're mostly done. The other item under discussion items is the master plan update. I know the RFP went out, and as I recall, the deadline for responses is March 4th. And between now and when we get the responses, there's probably not much to be done. Anything else on that, Chris?
Nope, that covers about what I had to say. We have gotten some additional firms that have reached out and asked for clarification where the materials were. So The word is getting out there, the buzz is being created, and we're seeing a lot of firms interested in submitting proposals. So I'm hoping in that early March period, we're going to have quite a bit to look over. So
Good.
Do you have any interest from CMRPC?
yes, they did receive the proposal and they're reviewing it.
All right, moving on then. General business. We have some bills to be approved.
I move we approve the bills.
Second.
Moved and seconded that we approve the bills. Any discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Venkatraman,
Aye.
Mr. Wood,
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger,
Aye.
Ms. Hassinger,
Aye.
and Dave votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. Minutes of previous meetings. We had a December 13th meeting minutes. I will say I looked over them and nothing caught my eye that needed to be changed. Not that I'm the last word on it.
I move we approve the minutes and any changes during discussion if there is any.
Second.
Moved and seconded, minutes of December 13th. Any discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Venkatraman,
Aye.
Mr. Wood,
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger,
Aye.
Ms. Hassinger,
Aye.
Mr. Robbins votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. Staff report.
So a couple quick things. I know I reviewed the planning board's proposed budget or planning department's proposed budget. I'll be going over that with the TA in a more finalized version tomorrow. There's no changes as of yet from what was provided to the that I presented to the planning board, but just a notice that we're reviewing that and that's continuing. On Friday, we do have our annual reports due. I apologize, I was not able to get a draft to the planning board to take a look at. I will be writing that up and I will submit, that to the TA's office, but I'll also provide that once I've completed it to the board members. And we'll put it on the next agenda if we want to discuss. The annual report is typically the information contained is pretty procedural in nature, updating numbers. I may include a little bit of an extra narrative about kind of the switch to remote hearings that we've been doing and how that's been working. But obviously, if there's other things that you feel should be included or that you wanted me to mention in the annual report, feel free to pass those along and I can include those.
Yes, I can say that the office has been tolerant of a few days or even a couple weeks delay in receiving those annual reports. So, and our next meeting is the 7th. So it's, if we do have any changes to submit after the 7th, it won't be very much past the January 31st deadline.
Right. Yeah.
The thing that might be worth mentioning, if not already intended to be mentioned, is the outdoor dining stuff.
Yes. Okay. Very good point.
It might be interesting to have a little to say about progress towards housing. There's a lot of interest around town about meeting the state's needs for housing and of course affordable housing. So a little summary around that subject might be.
Yeah.
See what it looks like and see if it makes sense.
Okay.
Anything else in the staff report, Chris?
And then finally, I'm hoping to have some, I've started a little bit of chipping away at some zoning amendments for the spring. So I'm hoping at end of February, beginning of March to have some more formal presentations for the board to dig into. Again, we're looking at the outdoor dining, kind of formalizing that process a little bit more, specifically the conversion of parking lots to outdoor dining for seasonal use. And then looking at some updates to the marijuana regulations. And then I'm also going to include, I did a preliminary review of, we had that discussion about mixed use in the neighborhood business at the previous meeting. And I did some preliminary looking at, how that plays into the regulations, looking at neighborhood business and commercial business, both of which don't currently allow that mixed use in those zones. And so I think there may be some ways of addressing those by allowing that for special permit in those two zones. But I do want to do a little bit more review of specifically where, you know, the commercial business and neighborhood businesses, what the impacts of that could be. You know, make sure that there's no unintended consequences of allowing that. But I think that may be an easy fix for that.
I noticed publications about passing regulations, or I don't know, it's laws about multifamily housing by right requirements. And I don't know whether that is for this year, because I don't know whether we have all that much information, but it's a big deal. It sounds like it's a big deal. So I think keeping up to date with what's going on and all of that would be good for us.
Yeah, so I think that's the MBTA communities, the open kind of the open hearing for that at the state level is currently going on. That'll be closing in March. I did prepare a memo that I believe it went to the town administrator's office and select board, kind of summarizing, you know, where we are in that process. I know Chairman Robbins has been kind of watching that as well and keeping track of it. So I think, you know, from the preliminary review, I think there's some potential challenges to that zoning and implementing that specifically in Grafton. I think there may be some opportunities. It's hard to really nail it down because we are still waiting on the guideline, you know, the guidance and guidelines formally that'll be coming out in the summer. But we'll continue to monitor that process. And
Okay, so that's not actually enacted yet.
It's law, but the regulations are in draft form. at the
Oh,
moment.
okay. So because that my impression in reading about it wherever on the web, on the internet, seemed to be saying that it was, you know, here it is.
Yeah, no, they just came out with the draft regulations in the middle of December, and we're now in a public comment period on the draft regulations. And as Chris said, that public comment period closes in, I think it's toward the end of March, after which the regulations will be finalized. But I suspect, I know I've been thinking a bit about submitting some questions or comments, because there are some aspects of the regulations that I think are maybe unclear or potentially unworkable. And I imagine, Chris, you're looking to, you know, to get the select board and the TA's office also to contemplate, you know, thinking about the impacts on Grafton.
Yeah, I guess that it would help to have a look at, if they do what they say they're going to do, how does it work in Grafton? You know, what is our circumstance? What are our circumstances?
Chris, would it be worthwhile sharing that memo with the board?
yeah, I can.
The board would probably be interested in that.
Yeah, we can certainly put that on. Yeah, send it around.
Okay.
Anything else from the staff report, Chris?
That's it. Thank you.
Anybody see anything in correspondence that caught their eye? Any reports from planning board representatives on town committees and CMRPC?
They had their first session there. They're starting the regional plan, and they had a good sized meeting. A lot of people came talking about it. Want to keep an eye on that.
Yep.
It's interesting how much energy the staff is putting into that. My goodness. I think that maybe they can draw some employee, you know, some new people. Apparently it's kind of hard to find people to fill the slots. I see a head going up and down over there. I hear from Janet every time about about that.
You beat up your hand.
Hmm?
Beat up your hand.
All right. Any other reports from planning board members, representatives and town committees and CMRPC? Is there anything else that may be that may lawfully come before the board?
Well, wishes to Bob Hassinger to get better.
What's that?
How
Well,
are you feeling?
better.
Good.
Okay, well, it's gonna be a while before I feel better. So I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded that we adjourn. Mr. Venkatraman,
Aye.
Mr. Wood,
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger,
Aye.
Ms. Hassinger,
Aye.
Mr. Robbins votes aye. We are adjourned.